ahead and share my screen with you guys. My story today does not take place in Antarctica, but it has to do with Antarctica. So let me tell you what happened. So back in 2004, my husband and I decided to take a trip around the world. That's literally what the ticket was called. So we traveled to 8 different countries, okay? So along the trip, we flew into Auckland, New Zealand, which is the North Island of New Zealand. And when we were there, we rented a small motorhome and drove around the North Island onto the South Island. And the South Island is where Lord of the Rings was taped. So if you think about the scenery in that movie, lots of mountains, and the further south you get, it becomes more barren because of the cold weather. Well, there are 2 places in the world that are mainly known to as an access point for Antarctica, and that is South America, the tip of South America, and Christchurch, New Zealand. So we went to Christchurch, New Zealand, and when we were there, we thought, oh, let's go to the Antarctica Museum and see what Antarctica is all about. So we went to the museum and spent the day in there and, learned all about the animals and the weather and everything the scientists do down there. And when you get to the end, there's this room. It's a simulation where you get these jackets, these big jackets, and you walk into the room and it looks like Antarctica. I mean, it has the snow and it has, the animals and the weather and all of that stuff. So when I mean weather, I literally mean a simulation with the weather. They had this huge thermometer, and when the simulation started, it was just blowing a little bit. But then as you're standing in the simulation, it starts to blow harder and harder and harder. And you guys, I can be pretty hard-minded, stubborn if I set a goal. When it comes to warm or cold weather, I had no goal to sit there through the entire simulation. It was so cold. I don't even know if I made it halfway through the simulation. So the wind is blowing. I'm like, all right, I'm out. So I ran out, and there's all these people watching from the outside because you could watch through this window. And I remember Casey was standing it a little longer than I did, but there were some people who made it to the end, and it was crazy though. I mean, I just cannot imagine living in such a cold place. I mean, it's beautiful if you're looking at these pictures, but cold, okay? And the wind is horrendous. So we got back to our hotel, and in 2004, we didn't have social media. So what we did is we would email family and just say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is where we are today. And they kind of knew we were going on a trip around the world, but they didn't know exactly where. So I told them, I said, yeah, we went to Antarctica today, and this is what it was like. And I told them everything I learned in the museum, okay? So we get home from our trip around the world, and it's like a year or 2 later, and my brother sends us all an email, again, sharing what went on in his life, okay? Thinking, you guys gotta think, my brother lives in California. Okay, so I'm gonna start telling you the story. Well, he sends us this email. He says, I was on the radio and I won a trip around the world. And so of course I immediately perk up. I'm like, oh, awesome, tell me about it. I wanna hear everything. Where did you go? So he starts with, well, I went to Norway. Well, I lived in Norway, right? So I know Norway. I said, oh, that's so cool. What did you get to see? What did you do? He said, I don't know, it was dark. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I get that. It's dark in the wintertime. Sun doesn't really even come up. So, well, where else did you go? Japan. How was Japan? Well, I don't know because I didn't get out of the airport because we were rushing to the next country. Okay, so I start processing it more. And I'm thinking, this is fishy. Something's not right about this. So eventually I sent him an email back and I said, so how was the Epcot Center? And if any of you guys know anything about the Epcot Center, that's a Disney World in Florida. And when you go through the park, you go to different countries as you go around the park, right? And they have Japan, they have Norway. I remember Egypt being there also. So I get this email back from my brother. How did you know? I was like, yes, I got him, because he was trying to get me back for the Antarctica prank, right? So now a few more years go by, and I'm sitting there talking to my dad one day, and Antarctica comes up. I said, Dad, you realize I didn't actually go to Antarctica, right? He's like, you didn't? I'm like, oh my gosh, I had you fooled too. Awesome. So anyway, that is my story about Antarctica. And aren't these gorgeous? Like, my mom actually took a trip down there a few years back and saw lots of penguins. And she said, actually, what was scarier, that you had to watch out for the seals. So it's kind of one of those things I want to go now, just because it's another continent to explore and talk about the wildlife and all of that. She left from South America, the tip of South America, and that is one of the most, I think it is the most dangerous sea in the world. And she said, as they were traveling from Antarctica back to South America, the ocean was stormy to the point where the waves were going over the ship. So can you guys imagine? Oh my gosh, what a neat experience though. Oh, let me just take care of the chat real